It is the final week of the URC group stages and there's a lot on the line. It is possible, however, for every single South African team to qualify for the Champions Cup next year, and I'm going to tell you how. We are blessed with two massive local derbies this weekend. The Stormers taking on the Lions and the Bulls taking on the Sharks. If you haven't, please make sure you absolutely mur that subscribe button. As you guys know, we're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we cannot do that without you. So mur that subscribe button, leave this video a like, and as always, drop your opinions and predictions down in the comments of how you see this weekend's games going. Okay, so first we have to understand, how does a team qualify for the Champions Cup? Well, it is quite simple. If a team finishes in the top 8 of the URC, they automatically qualify for a Champions Cup position in the following year. But then you're going to ask me, but Jordan, how did the Sharks qualify? How are they going to qualify? Because the Sharks have had an absolutely dismal season in the URC. They've only won 4 out of their 17 games so far. They currently sit 13th in the URC with absolutely no chance of making it into the top 8. Well, the Sharks played in the Challenge Cup final, which is one tier lower than the Champions Cup. Think of it like the Champions League, Europa, and then Conference League in football. The Sharks came up against Gloucester in that final and they ended up beating them, meaning that the winner of that final of the Challenge Cup gets an automatic position into the Champions Cup the following year. So the Sharks have already qualified for the Champions Cup for next year. So the Sharks are sorted. Let's move on to the Bulls. Now, the Bulls, their only way to qualify is to finish in the top 8, which they have already done. They currently sit 2nd in the URC and they can't move down lower than 4th. So the Bulls are already qualified for the Champions Cup next year, but there's a lot more for the Bulls to play for this weekend when they come up against the Sharks. So let's chat about the Sharks versus Bulls game a little bit and kind of what's on the line for the Bulls in that game. Well, the equation is quite simple for the Bulls. They have to beat the Sharks, preferably with a bonus point, but it's not necessary. And then they need Munster to lose to Ulster in their game this weekend so that the Bulls can finish in that number 1 position. If Munster end up beating Ulster, then Munster will retain top spot. The Bulls could potentially finish 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, depending on what happens with Leinster and the Glasgow Warriors. So for the Bulls, they need to make sure that they beat the Sharks and that they beat them convincingly, and then hopefully Munster slip up against Ulster, which is very possible. So how do I see this game between the Sharks and the Bulls going? Well, the Bulls are clear favorites in this game on the bookie sites, on what people think, but the Sharks will be brimming with confidence after their Challenge Cup win against Gloucester. The only thing is the last time the Bulls won in Durban was all the way back in 2021. Historically, it's a very, very difficult place for the Bulls to go and play at and try and get a good result there. Even if the Sharks haven't been in great form in the URC. They've been in phenomenal form in the European competitions. I mean, if we just look back at that Challenge Cup final, Sia Masuku has been absolutely phenomenal since he's started playing for the Sharks. But, I mean, he scored 21 points in that final with 2 try assists. The total points that Sia Masuku wasn't involved with in that final was just 5. And the Sharks scored 36 points. So it just shows how vital Sia Masuku is for that Sharks side. Grant Williams was also phenomenal. His box kicking, his delivery off the ruck, his defense was phenomenal in that final. And then you look at the Sharks forwards and you've got a full Springbok front row. Bongi Manambe, Oxencho, and Vincent Koch, who were absolutely phenomenal against Gloucester. They scrummed Gloucester into the ground. Vincent Koch ended up getting man of the match in the Challenge Cup. So that front three is formidable. Then behind them, you've got Eben Etzebeth, who also had a phenomenal game against Gloucester. He's a big presence. He gets go forward ball. He is very, very dangerous. And if those front three and Eben are firing, it's a very, very good forward pack. Pepsi Buthelezi also had a very good final against Gloucester. He scored that individual try. Fussy seems to have found his form a little bit. So although the Sharks haven't been doing great in the URC, they will be brimming with confidence. They finally found their form towards the back end of the season, and I do think they can cause this Bulls team quite a lot of problems. There's the factor of, will the Sharks be a little bit hungover and tired after their Challenge Cup victory, having to fly back to South Africa and then host the Blue Bulls, who have been in phenomenal form the entire season. Probably one of the best seasons of rugby that the Bulls have put together in quite a long time. The Bulls also have a guaranteed quarterfinal that is happening next weekend. So I think the Bulls' mindset will be that they have to win this game and they have to sort of tighten all their nuts and bolts in preparation for that quarterfinal. But I mean, the Bulls forwards, Ulrich Loh, Cameron Hanekom, need to have good games. That Bulls pack is going to come up against a very, very good Sharks pack. Half of it is Springboks. So it's a good test for the Bulls to test what they're about, test their processes, test their systems in preparation for the quarterfinals and the semifinals. The Bulls backline has also been absolutely phenomenal. The Bulls have been scoring a ridiculous amounts of tries through Kane and Moody, Kirtley Aronson, David Creel has been good. Willie Leroux, although despite what you think of him, Willie Leroux has had a great season and is an assist king at the moment. Then Ambrose Papier has been in phenomenal form as well for the Bulls. Johan Goosen is back. He put up quite a lot of points in the Bulls' last game. So the Bulls are firing on all cylinders. It's difficult to go to the Shark Tank and get a result, and the Sharks seem to have found their form. So how do I see this game going? For me, I do think the Bulls are going to win it. I do think it's going to be a little bit tighter than people think. So for me, I'm going to go Bulls by 9. Then we move over into the Stormers versus Lions game. So first of all, before we dive into sort of the preview of what's going to happen in that game, let me tell you how the Stormers and the Lions can qualify for the Champions Cup next year. Now, the Stormers currently sit in 5th, but if they lose to the Lions, they could move all the way down to 7th. So yes, even if they lose to the Lions, they qualify for the Champions Cup, but it's vital that the Stormers pick up a win, because if you finish 7th, you have a much more difficult quarterfinal than if you finish 5th. For the Lions, the equation's also quite simple. They need to beat the Stormers, not necessarily with a bonus point, and they'll finish in the inside the top 8, potentially even 5th, because the teams that sit 7th and 8th are Edinburgh and Benetton, and those two play against each other this weekend. So one of those teams is going to get minimal points. So it's worked out perfectly for the Lions, because if they beat the Stormers, they through to the top 8. They're going to play a quarterfinal, and more importantly, they'll be in the Champions Cup next year. So if all of those things happen, if the Lions beat the Stormers and if the Bulls beat the Sharks, then we will see all 4 South African franchises in the Champions Cup next year, which is unheard of. It's absolutely massive for South African rugby, and it's going to do so much good for the development of these teams, as well as the financial incentive of getting to the Champions Cup. So how do I see the Stormers Lions game going? Well, the Stormers have been in decent form the entire season, but they definitely haven't been at their best. If we look at them last season, if we look at them the season before, they're just not clicking the way they used to. Stormers have won their last 4 out of 5 encounters against the Lions, and the last time the Lions beat the Stormers in Cape Town was back in 2021. You have to remember how difficult it is to beat the Stormers in Cape Town. They've only lost 3 games at home in the last 2 years, and that's against teams like La Rochelle, Leinster, those big clubs. Now, I'm not saying the Lions aren't a big club, but they haven't been great in the past couple of years, and yes, they have found some good form towards the back end of this season. They have won 3 out of their last 4 games, coming off an absolutely massive win over the Glasgow Warriors in Joburg, and that's going to give them a lot of confidence, because they even went down a man. They looked, the Lions, that was probably the best game they've played the entire season, so they'll be coming in to this game with some really good confidence. Jordan Hendrickse had a very good game at 12. I'm wondering if they're going to shift him to 10. Selena Nohamba has been in phenomenal form for the Lions. Kewan Horn is always dangerous at the back there, and the big sort of issue for the Stormers is that they don't have their strike man. Damian Willemse has been injured. He is vital to the Stormers game plan. He makes so much space. He creates so many chances. So it's going to be interesting to see who they put in there. It's probably going to be Sasha Mgumazulu or someone like Wandile Simalani. So don't get me wrong, the Stormers side is still very dangerous. Marnie Lebok at 10. You're going to have Sasha Mgumazulu at 12. You have Warwick Galant behind them, not mentioning the forward. So the Stormers side is very good, but I do think they are beatable if the Lions step up, if they front up against that big Stormers pack and get some go forward ball and then put it through the hands and let their backs do the work. The Lions can beat the Stormers, and I hope as a South African that the Lions do, because then we'll have 4 South African sides in the Champions Cup next year. but I just think it's so difficult to beat the Stormers at home. The Stormers also want an easier quarterfinal, so for them to finish 5th compared to 7th is absolutely massive. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens. For me, I hope, like I said, the Lions win, but I'm going to go for the Stormers by 4 points. As always, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Gooi your predictions down in the comments. If you haven't, make sure you absolutely moor that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy. Peace.